A master of the courses of thought by Venerable Rung Ruang Pa Pasaru, Dr. Rung Ruang Lim Chopadipa. The mind is a complex system with several parallel processing simultaneously happening inside the central nervous system. In addition, the mind is very dynamic as every parts of the parallel processing keep on changing. However, the mind will fetch the object of consciousness one at a time. Therefore, we can experience that the mind keeps on changing its state from one state to another state all the times. In Buddhism, the varieties of unwholesome thoughts can be classified into the 5 lower fetters, namely sensual pleasure, desire, ill will, depression, anxiety, and doubt. Thinking is such a main activity in the mind function in life, starting from receiving stimulus from the world, but the volitional formations in the process of dependent origination in many rounds will drive the flow of the information of individuality within the mind processing. The more this volitional formations within the process of dependent origination keep on going on, the matter becomes more complex as the middle defilement of the 5 lower fetter be aggravated to be rough defilement with greed, hatred, and delusion, and eventually bursting out into evil doing to the world. For example, greed is a combination of unwholesome thoughts of sensual pleasure mixed with anxiety and confusion. Hatred is a combination of ill will mixed with depression, anxiety, and confusion. In order to resolve these unwholesome thoughts, traditionally in the mantra meditation, the mind abandons such unwholesome thoughts by force, and then rushes the mind to the first jhana directly, while in the Buddhist meditation the Buddha suggested to establish mindfulness to study the Dharma, and then apply a proper Dharma to abandon the unwholesome thought by wisdom. The Buddha compared the mantra approach like putting a stone on top of the grass of unwholesome. The grass will be contained for a while, but once taking out the stone, the grass of unwholesome will resume growing again. This is the reason why in Buddhism, all kinds of problems must be studied further to the root cause of the problem, and then gain the knowledge as wisdom to resolve the problem rightly. When encountering with various unwholesome thoughts of the 5 lower fetters, the Buddha suggested a general strategy to handle the emotional thought by having an opposite perception of the incoming stimulus to divert on such a problem as follows.
When countering with any arising troubling thought, we should learn on how to maneuver the problem by having proper perception. That is, when encountering with something we like with desire and lust, then by establishing mindfulness with proper perception to view that as time passes by, aging will transform the beauty to be old. This is a way to contain and to abandon such an arising emotion of sensual pleasure. On the other hand, when encountering with something we dislike with desire for destruction, at this time then establishing mindfulness with proper perception to view that this non-beauty is just a part of natural processing by certain cause and effect. This is a way to contain and to abandon such an arising emotion of hatred. When encountering with strong emotional feeling, it is necessary to contain it with proper counterattack perception to subdue an arising emotional feeling, no matter we like it or dislike it. By doing so with the proper perception, the mind will be stabilized to be neutral against any kinds of unwholesome thoughts by wisdom.
This technique to abandon troubling thought is simply taking the opposite perception of Dharma to counter against the unwholesome thought, that is, when the mind is bothered by any troubling thought, then switching the mind to focus on something of the opposite type, and then the mind will slowly abandon that troubling thought. Typically, as a rule of thumb, the Buddha exemplified the 10 Dharma with right perceptions as a way to counter the troubling mind as follows.
Having a perception on impermanency. That is, when encountering with arriving stimulus, then having a perception that the stimulus is impermanent, whatsoever is happening, is just temporal, and it will be changed to some other thing anyway, and if we abandon it for a while, it will be changed to something else. Having a perception on no self or impersonality. That is, when encountering with arriving stimulus, then having a perception that the stimulus is no self or impersonal, we cannot own it, and it will not be whatsoever is wished. With a certain cause, it will be changed to something else. Having a perception on loathsomeness. That is, when encountering with arriving stimulus, then having a perception that the stimulus is loathsome. This technique is specifically designed to cope with something which is sensual present, and we prone to attaching to it with an expectation that we can hold it forever. And by having a perception of loathsome on the stimulus, then we can abandon the stimulus as early as possible before making any further engagement. Having a perception on the disadvantage of the body. That is, when encountering with arriving stimulus, then having a perception that the stimulus associated with the body is disadvantage. This technique is specifically designed to cope with the attraction to the beauty of body. Having a perception on abandonment. That is, when encountering with arriving stimulus, then having a perception to abandon the arriving stimulus. Having a perception on detachment. That is, when encountering with arriving stimulus, then having a perception to detach the arriving stimulus. Having a perception on cessation. That is, when encountering with arriving stimulus, then having a perception to cease the arriving stimulus. In general, if we can hold the attachment for a while, the arising stimulus will cease anyway, and the mind will divert the attention to some other thing else. Having a perception on the non-delightfulness of the whole world. This has to be performed with the right perception that it is not a pessimistic view of the world, but when realizing that the world is impermanent, deteriorating, and no self, then the mind will be non-delightful to the whole world. Having a perception on the non-pleasantness of the whole world. This has to be performed with the right perception that it is not a pessimistic view of the world, but when realizing that the world is impermanent, deteriorating, and no self, then the mind will be non-pleasant to the whole world. Having mindfulness of in and out breathing to abandon any arising unwholesomeness inside the mind. In making right perception, establishing mindfulness is a prerequisite factor that must always be accompanied with.
The 10 perceptions are in fact an advanced dharma to correct the worldly perception to be right perception, so that the mind will be disenchanted from the world. The Buddha explained this technique to a monk, named Kiramananda, who was quite skillful in Buddhist practice already. And after listening to the Buddha's words, he followed the practice to abandon the 5 lower fetters without difficulty, then dwelling into absorption, and performing insight observation to gain wisdom, and eventually being able to destruct all the taints in order to liberate the mind. In principle, thinking is part of natural process, sort of uncontrollable in the sense that we cannot dictate what we want the mind to be as wish. And no matter we may like it or not, the mind always functions. Thinking, resulting either the condition of wholesome thought, which leads to benefit to life, or unwholesome thought, which leads to harm to life. In Buddhism, the subject of the unwholesome thoughts of 5 lower fetters, namely sensual desire, ill will, depression, anxiety, and doubt, is so important to the way to improve the quality of life. However, it is almost impossible that we can avoid these unwholesome thoughts with the complexity of the combinations of these 5 lower fetters. For examples, when encountering with serious events of experiencing the loss of someone, having conflicting with someone who is powerful, experiencing with unfair treatments from the world, getting sick or illness from serious disease. In these situations, the mind will dwell into the deep depression, and keeping on bothering with the unwholesome thought mixed with the combination of ill will, having doubt to be associated with such bad luck, and to be worried with anxiety of what will happen in the future. And even when trying to contain a certain type of lower fetter, but after a while another new lower fetter will come up to bother the mind again. The problem becomes aggravated into more and more complex by our own thinking. And then the mind becomes restless, and even cannot sleep for many days and nights. Therefore, it is very necessary to make a comprehensive study on Dharma rightly so that we can apply a proper Dharma to resolve the arising problem correctly. From the Buddhist perspective, unwholesome thoughts can be temporarily abandoned by forcing the mind, but if we want to permanently abandon these unwholesome thoughts, we have to always activate the mindfulness to monitor the mind in the present moment, and once finding any unwholesome thought, then applying the particular good knowledge of Dharma to handle the arising unwholesome thoughts of each type of the 5 lower fetter one by one, so that the mind will become internally steadied, composed, unified, and concentrated by the wisdom of Dharma. The application of Dharma, to subdue any arising emotional thought, is a way to become a master of the courses of thought within the mind processing. Whatsoever we do in life mostly is an outcome of what we have thought, And in Buddhism, in order to purify the mind, we have to go through the courses of thought to explore the complexity of thinking and to abandon any unwholesome along the way one by one till dwelling to the initial thought, where the thinking process begins within the inner mind. And this is the special, right concentration, in the Noble Eightfold Paths. By definition, a master of the courses of thought is the one who will think whatever thought he wishes to think, and he will not think any thought that he does not wish to think, as follows.
When a monk is pursuing the higher mind, inner mind, from time to time he should give attention to 5 signs. What are the 5? 1. Here, monks, when a monk is giving attention to some sign, and owing to that sign there arise in him evil unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hate, and delusion, then he should give attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome. Such as giving attention with mindfulness to the mind on the goodness of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the monks. And when he gives attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome, then any evil unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hate, and delusion are abandoned in him and subside. With their abandoning, his mind becomes internally steadied, composed, unified, and concentrated. Just as a skilled carpenter or his apprentice might knock out, remove, and extract a coarse peg by means of a fine one, so too, when a monk gives attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome, his mind becomes internally steadied, composed, unified, and concentrated. 2. If, while he is giving attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome, there still arise in him evil unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hate, and delusion, then he should examine the danger in those thoughts thus. These thoughts are unwholesome, reprehensible, resulting in suffering. When he examines the danger in those thoughts, then any evil unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hate, and delusion are abandoned in him and subside. With their abandoning his mind becomes internally steadied, composed, unified, and concentrated. Just as a man or a woman, young, youthful, and fond of ornaments, would be horrified, humiliated, and disgusted if the carcass of a snake or a dog or a human being were hung around his or her neck, so too, when a monk examines the danger in those thoughts. 3. If, while he is examining the danger in those thoughts, there still arise in him evil unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hate, and delusion, then he should try to forget those thoughts and should not give attention to them. When he tries to forget those thoughts and does not give attention to them, then any evil unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hate, and delusion are abandoned in him and subside. With their abandoning his mind becomes internally steadied, composed, unified, and concentrated. Just as a man with good eyes who did not want to see forms that had come within range of sight would either shut his eyes or look away, so too, when a monk tries to forget those thoughts and does not give attention to them. 4. If, while he is trying to forget those thoughts and is not giving attention to them, there still arise in him evil unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hate, and delusion, then he should give attention to stilling the thought formation of those thoughts. When he gives attention to stilling the thought formation of those thoughts, then any evil unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hate, and delusion are abandoned in him and subside. With their abandoning his mind becomes internally steadied, composed, unified, and concentrated. Just as a man walking fast might consider, why am I walking fast? What if I walk slowly? And he would walk slowly, then he might consider, why am I walking slowly? What if I stand? And he would stand, then he might consider, why am I standing? What if I sit? And he would sit, then he might consider, why am I sitting? What if I lie down? And he would lie down. By doing so he would substitute for each grosser posture one that was subtler. So too, when a monk gives attention to stilling the thought formation of those thoughts. 5. If, while he is giving attention to stilling the thought formation of those thoughts, there still arise in him evil unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hate, and delusion, then, he should beat down, constrain, and crush mind with mind. He beats down, constrains, and crushes mind with mind, then any evil unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hate, and delusion are abandoned in him and subside. With their abandoning, his mind becomes internally steadied, composed, unified, and concentrated. Just as a strong man might seize a weaker man by the head or shoulders and beat him down, constrain him, and crush him, so too, when a monk beats down, constrains, and crushes mind with mind. Monks, when a monk is giving attention to some sign, and owing to that sign there arise in him evil unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hate, and delusion, then when he gives attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome, any such evil unwholesome thoughts are examined on the danger in those thoughts, then these unwholesome thoughts are abandoned in him and subside, and with their abandoning his mind becomes internally steadied, composed, unified, and concentrated. When he tries to forget those thoughts and does not give attention to them, he beats down, constrains, and crushes mind with mind. Any such evil unwholesome thoughts are abandoned in him and subside, and with their abandoning, his mind becomes internally steadied, composed, unified, and concentrated. This is then called a master of the courses of thought. He will think whatever thought he wishes to think, and he will not think any thought that he does not wish to think. He has severed craving, flung off the fetters, and with the complete penetration of conceit he has made an end of suffering. That is what the Blessed One said. The monks were satisfied and delighted in the Blessed One's words.
When encountering with some serious situation, the unwholesome thought will keep on arising in the mind, and in this circumstance the Buddha suggested to have mindfulness with careful attention to some other sign connected with what is wholesome to shift the mind from unwholesome thoughts, such as giving attention with mindfulness to the mind on the goodness of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the monks. Generally, the unwholesome thought will be abandoned. However, if the unwholesome thoughts still come back, then we have to apply the Yoniso Manasikara to investigate the danger of those thoughts, that they are harmful to the mind and life, and no matter how much we may worry about them, the problems cannot be resolved anyway. In this situation, if we can decide a certain strategy to cope with the problem, then we should forget those thoughts and should not give attention to them, and those evil unwholesome thoughts connected with desire, hate, and delusion will be abandoned in him and subside. However, if those unwholesome thoughts still arise back again, then we should apply the Yoniso Manasikara on having further investigation on stilling the thought formation of those thoughts. By having a clear understanding on the formations and the origin of the unwholesome thoughts, now beating down, constraining the mind, and crushing mind with mind to abandon unwholesome thoughts, and with their abandoning, his mind becomes internally steadied, composed, unified, and concentrated, and the person will become a master of the courses of thought.